Hi, I'm Stacey Williams-Ng, and today we are going to be talking about my first deck, the Southern Gothic Oracle, of which I am so proud. It is all about Southern folklore and magic. Okay, so today we're going to do an unboxing of the Southern Gothic Oracle. I have a brand new one right here, still in the cellophane, and I wanted you to see the original one. This was the Kickstarter edition. It's in a drawer-shaped box. So if you have one that looks like this, or you found one on the market, take good care of it, because I'll never be printing them like this again, and they are now limited edition collector's items. Probably better when I'm dead, but just for the record, this is what they used to look like. Same product, same cards. The card finish has been improved and so on, but it's the same story. Now I'm gonna open this up so that we have a nice fresh one. I thought you would appreciate me using a nice fresh deck instead of my old bedraggled one. So I put the mason jar card on the cover because the mason jar is about inheritances, and I feel like this deck I really channeled from my own ancestors. It was an inheritance of its own. So the card backs have a wishbone, chicken bone on them. They are not coated. I really was going for a very rustic feel. There are 45 cards in the deck, which we'll be exploring in just a second. The book is really little guy. Very thin, and I had a lot to say, so I'm looking forward to doing an expanded version of this, and I will have an announcement later telling you about all of that. So I'm going to have the book off to the side and the box too, because we're going to focus on the cards. The Hurricane Lamp, card number 1, features one of these old oil lamps sitting on a book. It's card number 1 because it really represents our own inner light. And down here, you will see that I have keywords on all of the cards. So preparedness and inner light. It's an overlay of the two because the hurricane lamp is something that in many country homes, people still have. I know my father still has one in his West Tennessee country cabin in case the electricity goes out. So it's all about being prepared, but you're being prepared because of your own inner light. The number 2 card is pair of shoes. And this is an interesting, I like to say that this is sort of like my lover's card because this has to do with coupling and partnership. If you're familiar at all with the practices of hoodoo, which is folk magic here in the South, based in African traditional religions, there's something called foot track magic, using someone's shoes or feet in spells. And so, for example, people might put herbs in the shoes and point them toward the bed so that the lover would come to them. It's a lot of fun if you want to research foot track magic. But for the purposes of the oracle, it represents basically duality and coupling. Number 3, the salamander, infinity, and reinvention. This is the salamander that will grow a new tail if his tail gets cut off. And frequently in tarot, both tarot and oracle, salamanders represent infinity. And so this is actually a Tennessee skink. Blackberries, card number 4. 4s represent foundations and rules, just like the Emperor card in tarot, for example. And blackberries was a foundation upon which many Southerners built a living in order to survive. So this card represents agency and independence because blackberries grow wild and free here in the South, and it's easy to pick them and actually make a subsistence living and survive in really dark times. The raccoon card, number 5, curiosity and perseverance. Enough said. I mean, I don't think a raccoon is unique to the South. There are plenty of things in here that are from other parts of the world as well, but I did include them in the Southern Gothic Oracle if they played into our story too. And the raccoon was just, to me, such a fun way to express the idea of curiosity. This painting, by the way, hangs in my mother's house. She loved it so much. I should mention that these were all acrylic paintings that I did. They were even in a show. So they're definitely not AI. They're not even digital. They're all entirely paintings on canvas. The dogwood blossoms represent rebirth and the afterlife. There's an old myth that the dogwood was the tree that was used to hang Jesus on the cross. that was the wood it was made from. And so the flowers have the 4 wounds of Jesus. Anyway, it's an interesting old myth, and it really makes me think about the afterlife and about my ancestors and the stories they used to tell. But it's also a spring flower, so anything spring related is always good to give us the feeling of rebirth, since that's what spring is. Number 7, here's a darker card, the abandoned plantation. This features the pretty familiar sight, if you live in Georgia, Mississippi, or Alabama, of these old mansions that are just crumbling ruins. And, many of them have been brought back as museum houses and so on. But I thought it was more interesting to look at the ones that are falling apart, because it shows that we're dismantling and we're moving past some of these ugly truths in the South. When they're revitalized as museums, even then it's so important, because then we are revisiting and remembering our history and remembering what happened. But this card coming up for you doesn't have to be specifically about the slave trade, of course, but it's using that very dark history as an analogy to something that might be in your own life, dismantling political systems, dismantling racism, dismantling other systems that aren't working, maybe even in your own family or workplace. The painter. So that is not a typo. It's the only time I actually used slang, or a slang like, I usually don't like to use the kind of vernacular spellings, but it was just too fun, because this isn't even a panther. I mean, painter is an Appalachian pronunciation of panther, which really is a misnomer for a mountain lion. And these are running extinct, but they do exist, and they are very, very strong and powerful. And there are many myths wrapped around them. So again, for like a tarot analogy, for lack of a better word, this is kind of my strength card. The Blessed Child, number 9. This is a graveyard angel, a little adolescent little girl angel that is such a common sight in Victorian graveyards and cemeteries here in the southern United States. So this one represents purity and lost innocence. Because, what could represent lost innocence like the grief of losing a child? That is a very dark card. I would like to qualify it, that I've had people ask about this. Like, remember, many people use these oracle cards, and you as well are looking for maybe insights into the future, or insights into your own life. And you draw this, please don't assume it means a dead child. What it's doing is, these are all analogies to help us think of broader philosophical concepts. And so this is really more about a loss of innocence than a prediction of a future death or loss. It's nothing like that. The conch shell. This from the coastal South, people love to collect seashells everywhere that there are oceans. But in the South, Florida in particular, you get a lot of people selling these as souvenirs, collecting them for their own homes. But the conch shell has a long, long history of being associated with the afterlife. So it's almost like it carries you across the sea and carries you home, the way it carried the conch animal that lived inside of it when it was there. So this one represents homecoming in a larger sense, but also in a day-to-day sense. Maybe you have a homecoming back to family, or you're coming back to values that you had when you were younger. But it's also a literal homecoming, or the afterlife. The Crystal Grotto, number 11, the holy number, the magic number. The Crystal Grotto is a location in Memphis, and it's a real place. It's an artificial grotto that's filled with crystals that were mined in Arkansas. It's a fascinating place, but it's truly a sacred place. And it's a place I like to visit here. And so I painted this from photographs I had taken in there, and it represents the energy or cosmos. If anything, it's almost like a high priestess card. The peacock, vanity, pride. Nest of wasps, teamwork, just like bees and wasps are a team. It's the order of things. Axe. So this card plays into sympathetic magic in Appalachian tradition, division and lessening. And I like to say that this card works really well when it comes up as a qualifier to another card. So for example, if you had just drawn the nest of wasps, and the message is about teamwork and order, maybe drawing this directly after it is like, well, maybe you need to cut that in half. Maybe you don't need as much teamwork. maybe you should have less teamwork and more independence. Do you see what I mean? So it works really well to qualify whatever card it's laying next to. The copperhead, deception, bad influences. Copperhead snakes are, if you're not familiar, they're terrifying and they are quite deadly and poisonous. So this is kind of the equivalent of my devil card, which is why I made it number 15, just like in the tarot. The crow. People here believe that seeing a crow in certain circumstances, whether it flies over your head, it depends on where you live, whether it's the Ozarks or Appalachia, or just seeing one at all, often is a bad omen. So I made this card represent dashed hopes and mourning. Notice he's on a mailbox. In other words, he is the message. Roots. Hoodoo is also often called root work. Sometimes they're interchangeable, sometimes they're used separately, but it's the act of using roots for magical influence. It's also very much an ancestral practice. In this image, you see a shell, a shiny shell on a tablecloth, and these walnut-looking roots are actually dried up roots of High John the Conqueror, which is also called conker, but it's a powerful root used for talismans. Blue moon. Apparently, we're not having any blue moons in 2025, which makes me a little bit sad. Blue moons is when you get 2 full moons in the same month, and they represent second chances and magic. So if you've ever heard the phrase once in a blue moon, it means something that's rare and special. Cowrie shells, number 19, passion and feminine power. If you've never noticed what a cowrie shell looks like, I'm not going to spell it out for you, but this is something that has been used to represent feminine mystique and even money for many centuries. The crossroads. Do I really have to tell you what that means? Choices, a road opener. If you're not familiar with the concept of a road opener, it's magical practices that open opportunities for you. The instrument, self-expression, throat chakra, speaking your truth, playing your banjo. The grove, this is a beautiful mystical forest representing divinity and awe. If you've ever walked into a forest like this one, which both resides forever in my imagination, but also on the north side of Memphis, and it's called Meeman Shelby Forest. And that place is just absolutely magical for me. And I used to walk there with my father and grandmother when I was a little girl. But this forest to me is just like it's honestly just like a temple. The cicada, metamorphosis and life cycles. A cicada is a funny little bug that stays in the ground in its larval stages for 13 years, 14 years, 17 years. It depends on which brood it's in and what kind of cicada it is. But they come out. They don't only come out for us every 13 years. They come out just about every year, depending on the brood. But they've been waiting for so long. So I always think it makes a really amazing analogy for the kind of cycles we wait for when we wait for our own chance. The mason jar, this one's on the cover of the box. I have one of the antique mason jars that are tinted green because I just love them. It's actually a ball jar. If you look, I actually painted in the ball logo. I hope I don't get in trouble with the ball people. But this represents mentorship and protection because our ancestors really taught us how to save food, how to can jam. This was all about survival. It wasn't just a fun hobby back in those days. The bayou. Water represents emotions. So this is the emotions card. Emotions and manifestation. Shows a beautiful low-lying swamp or a bayou. Mojo bag. This is like a prayer in a bag. Typically in root work and hoodoo, red flannel was used. So I showed a traditional red flannel bag. And again, you see the High John Conqueror roots on this side. You see some unknown powder over here, but roots and powders and salts, oils, feathers, bones, hair, all kinds of things played into these mojo bags. And then they would be carried on the person of the practitioner, the person wishing for an outcome. Black coffee, wake up. This is the awakening card, shadow work, really opening your eyes to what you need to be working on. The vanity set. This was found in just about every household back in the day. This was a common wedding gift for a bride, even for very humble households. You might live in a cabin, but you have this fancy silver vanity set. Now they're all over antique stores everywhere in the South. And it's kind of sad because people aren't receiving these anymore, but almost everyone's great-grandmother had one. Self-awareness and clarity, right? Looking in the mirror. The bottle tree. I have this in my actual yard. So the bottle tree is a tradition of putting up these old bottles because they would attract the evil spirits who would go in there because they were attracted to the shiny objects. And in the morning, they would be trapped and the sun would zap them and wash away the evil spirits. So it's always been a way to intercede, which is why I called it intercession. This was a belief that you could intercede with the spirit world and keep and protect your family from evil spirits coming into the house. Kudzu, if you've ever seen this, it's just a vine that goes absolutely nuts here in the South. It's not native to this place. It was introduced, I think, to, control erosion, but it will grow everywhere. It will grow over a parked car. It will grow over trees until you can't even tell what tree it was anymore. So kudzu, though, is not meant to be a negative card. It's a neutral card that simply means willpower and abundant growth. Again, my cards are always they're always analogies. They're not meant to be taken seriously, like, oh, kudzu is going to grow in your yard, or something's going to be runaway out of control. Instead, think about how kudzu grows and then apply it to your reading. The possum. Yes, it starts with an O, but the O is silent. And again, I wanted to go with correct spellings for most of these cards. So it's pronounced the possum, but it's spelled with an O at the beginning. And this represents diversity and plurality. Diversity is so important, especially now. I'm reading this in 2025, and we're, DEI programs are being attacked everywhere. So it's really been in the news, the discussion of the importance of diversity. And the reason I chose a possum for this card was because the possum is such a fascinating little creature. He's like part rat, part kangaroo, part mouse. He looks like he's a mixture of all these different cards, like a sphinx or other mythical creatures, the phoenix. And he's like the South's one funny little, mythical creature, except he's real. The Psalm book. So this is a ratty old singing book from an old church. And it's basically just the book of Psalms that's been isolated. And these used to be in everyone's household in the old days. And it represents faith and rejoicing. Black-eyed peas, number 33, represents wealth and prosperity because there's a tradition in the South to eat black-eyed peas on New Year's Day. And every pea you eat represents a day of good luck. Pine cone, third eye, new perspective. The pineal gland in the brain is kind of the physical equivalent, we think, of the third eye. It's where you have extrasensory perception, really, and it is shaped like a pine cone, and therefore that's why it's called the pineal gland. Horseshoe, good luck. I think you all knew this one. There's a whole debate over whether it should be facing up in order to catch the luck like a cup, or whether it should be facing down. It's just so funny to hear people argue about this, but either way, mine's facing up. I am in the camp of catching luck, and it's luck chance. Black walnut trees are so beautiful, and they grow prolifically here in the American South. I have it representing discernment and self-worth because I was equating the walnut itself with the brain. It's sympathetic magic. If something looks like something, like the way ginger looks like the digestive tract and is good for digestion, the walnut looks like the brain. So it was carried around as something that would help with discernment, maybe even with headaches. So I made the black walnut tree about that. It's a majestic tree. Wild violet, number 37, self-actualization. Be like the wild violet. Be individual, be crazy, be whoever you want to be, and spread wherever you need to spread without boundaries. Peaches, fertility and love. Not gonna lie, I was kind of inspired by the emoji of the peach, but also peaches in Georgia, of course, are culturally very, very significant for fertility and all that good stuff. The mockingbird, prophecies, communication. The mockingbird, of course, is called that because he can mock many other birds' calls. He doesn't really have a call of his own. I took some artistic license with him and made him blue. They're typically more gray, but mockingbirds are just lovely, and it's just delightful to hear them outside and see if they can trick you with their communication. The live oak. These trees are huge. It's hard to tell from the painting, but if a person were standing under this tree, they would be like a little gnat. They're just gigantic, multi-century old trees. And so this one represents longevity and reliability. Altar water, number 41. This is like, I made up this bottle, I just imagined it, but they used to be old cheap perfumes, really. Things like Florida water started life as a cheap cologne that you could get in the drugstore, and people started to use it to cleanse the air, to cleanse their spirit. It's basically the earliest form of aromatherapy around here. It wasn't called that in those days. And we still use scents to clear energy. So altar water is used in ritual and renewal to clear the energy, the energetic space, and raise the vibration. The dog, loyalty, belonging. You know what this means. Anytime you see a dog card, it's got to mean loyalty and friendship, right? Conversely, the alligator, number 43, is certainly not about friendship. It is about silence and introspection. If anything, this is like my hermit card. I didn't literally number them in every case, like the way I did. The copperhead is number 15, like the devil. That was just kind of a fun tongue-in-cheek. The alligator to me is different than the hermit because the alligator is a predator, whereas the hermit is not. So it's not exactly the same thing, but alligators do like to keep to themselves. The armadillo basket. Let's bring in some Southern eccentricity. So the armadillo basket, number 44, next to last, penultimate card, is about grounding and fierce protection. Any animal like a turtle, an armadillo, a shrimp, anything with a hard outer shell is a good animal to represent protection. And so armadillo is certainly like that. But in this case, people use taxidermy art to make it into baskets and other things. So this armadillo has been made into a basket, and therefore it's protecting us in another way. It's helping us to gather food. And then the last card in the deck is self-care. Take care of yourself. So the number 45 card, sassafras, is healing and self-care, because sassafras tea is something that was traditionally drunk in the Ozarks and beyond. That's actually where root beer comes from. So I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough of the Southern Gothic Oracle. Little announcement I have is that I am currently working to make this into a trilogy. So I have follow-up decks that are going to continue this tradition of Southern folklore in oracle cards, and I really hope you will stay tuned and stay on my mailing list so that you can learn more about the Southern Gothic Oracle and where this story is going. Thanks so much for joining me for this video. I really appreciate it. Bye, y'all.